Hello, everyone. Welcome to a discussion of Sandman. Specifically, we are going to be chatting today about the last three issues of Season of Mist. That includes chapters 5 and 6 and the epilogue, or if you're counting the issues in general, it's issues 26, 27, and 28. So that is what we're discussing, essentially the ending of Season of Mist. And I'm joined here today by Varsha from Reading by the Rainy Mountain. Hello, Varsha. Lovely to see you.
Hello, Philip. Nice to be here.
All right. And I'm also joined by the nemesis himself, a critical dragon, otherwise known as Professor Fireballs. How are you today, AP?
I was doing better before I had to speak to you, you evildoer.
so, so we are not exactly going at a blistering pace through this, but I think it's fair to say that we're enjoying the Sandman a lot. It's something we just do for fun and get together once in a while to talk about. So we do apologize if you're trying to follow along with us, but we're just going to keep, I think, getting together at the right times. Next time we're going to do, we're only going to read 3 issues for next time, and those are 3 kind of separate short story-ish kind of issues that AP will be hosting. So we might actually do that sooner rather than later, but we'll see. But anyway, I'm excited to talk about the ending of Season of Mist. But let's start with your general impressions of these last 3 issues. Either one of you want to go first with your general impressions? Do I have to call on someone?
Varsha, please.
You're the professors. You get to call call on the students to speak.
Mhm.
uh, yeah, so I think the biggest impression I had was one of a lot of fun. I think there were so many funny things that happened throughout, I guess the fact that Kilderkin was a box and he represents order, and he kept printing out little notes to say what he wants. And I liked that they all tried to guess what Dream wants, and I think we only know about one thing that he maybe would be tempted by, Nada in particular, but everything else, it made me curious about like whether that is something he would care about or if there's just posturing. And I think we kind of get the sense that he might, but not really. So it made me more curious about what are some of the things that Dream might be potentially tempted by. And yeah, I was surprised by the final decision that he made,
Uh-huh.
maybe. So yeah, those were my high level thoughts.
All right, excellent. And how about yourself, AP? What do you make of this particular ending of this arc?
This this is kind of one of the reasons why the Sandman as a series is one of my favorite sequences of comic books ever. And part of it is we had that build up to this moment of, Dream going down through hell, getting the key to hell, this whole conflict, and it ended so on this sinister note because Lucifer goes, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get my revenge." And what's my revenge? Here's the key to hell. I just closed it. It's unexpected, and there's this buildup of how is this going to play out? And for so many comics, particularly DC and Marvel, everyone is familiar with the superhero comics. There's this assumption that almost everything is going to be resolved with a big fight,
Mm-hmm.
a big clash, blowing things up, all of this. And the Sandman consistently finds interesting ways to resolve issues that don't involve a big fight. And it doesn't mean that there aren't sequences in it that have action components, but it relies a lot more on atmosphere, tone, mood, the characters involved, the different personalities, desires that these characters have, and how those interact, and how there are ramifications and repercussions, just not big fist fights. And this particular resolution, the idea, the problem of you own the hottest piece of real estate in the metaverse, like you own hell, that puts a target on you because people are going to want that. And so this entire resolution of it, and again, each of the different approaches show an aspect, and it's a fun investigation. It's a fun exploration of character and motivation. And that is one of the reasons why I find it so fascinating. And then it draws in different mythologies and stories and our knowledge and understanding of these characters from history and from mythology. And it's such a wonderful melange of all of these different things, which makes sense for it to be in the dreaming, this unconscious shared dream world that we all visit every night, that it is made up of all of these different things. So it works on a lot of different levels. And very rarely does it descend into something that you would think of as cliched or stereotypical. And it just was such a wonderful experience for me reading it the very, very first time, when my knowledge of comic books was so limited to a lot of the action and superhero style comics, that this was something that was much more about storytelling.
Mm. Yeah, very well said. I do agree with you about the somewhat subversive nature of this, and yet the story has tension all the way through. You know, you have these different contenders who want hell, and you don't know how it's going to be resolved. And even it seems like Dream is very unsure of what's going to happen. And then I felt in a way it was a kind of a fun way to resolve it, what happened. And I really enjoyed a couple of aspects of the ending, which kind of go full circle. You do get destiny there at the end with the book, and you have the very ending of the story written in the book, so we get to see what it looks like, you know. And then you have Lucifer. I expected Lucifer to this whole thing was a trick, that he was going to get Dream somehow, and that Dream was going to get zapped. But it just seemed like Lucifer genuinely wanted to get out of hell. He just wanted to. I've had enough of this, man. I just want to sit on a beach and watch the sunset, you know. And I loved Lucifer's final line in the story, which is, "Yeah, fine. I have to admit, this is a pretty good sunset, you know." And he's talking to God, you know. He's like, "Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. This is a good sunset, you know." I really loved the way he very unconventional, and somehow just felt right as well in terms of how things were resolved. I do kind of feel like at the same time, it's not just whimsy, that Gaiman is actually, he's exploring some stuff about human nature here, very much. And the fact that we have constructed, if you see it that way, you know, if you believe that humans have influenced the way religions manifest, and you see that this dichotomy between heaven and hell and good and evil, and you kind of see, I think one of the things that Gaiman is exploring is how there seems to be within us almost a need to bifurcate the world into these categories. And so you see when the two angels who end up in charge of hell at the end, what are their names? Remiel and
Duma.
Duma.
yes, Duma. They end up in charge, and Duma never says a word, which, you know, it's Remiel who says everything. You get this sense that this is more about, not about God, capital G, God, and the way God is decided that hell has to exist. That's the narrative, right? But I think that what Gaiman is really doing is exploring, why does humanity, or a big part of humanity, want or need the notion of hell? Why do we have this dichotomy of good? This is just so a part of how we're programmed, how we've evolved. There's the in group, and then there's the out group, and then there's good and there's bad. And so I just like the way what I feel like Gaiman is holding up a mirror to us with this very creative story, and repurposing a lot of myths and interesting things in the process. So uh,
And but
thoughts?
just to build on that point, like even the separation of order and chaos. If you had to pick, you go, well, order is clearly the good one, and chaos is clearly the evil one. But that's not. They're both defined by what they are, and it's we need both, because if everything is too ordered, there's no growth or change or mutability. But if everything is too chaotic, then it all falls apart. That it's about that balance point between them. That's where we exist. And so by defining these extremes, we create where the reality in which we live. And if we think even of the endless themselves, they are the definition and articulation of an extreme, which through their existence allows the other thing to exist. So there's a lot of play with binaries, with dyads, with poles. And even then, like, looking at Loki, and we'll probably end up talking about this, but Loki being very much like Puck.
Yeah.
And again, how Dream resolves issues with Chronozon and with Nada, that these are not the expected resolutions. These are not the stories of the Wild West and the white hat going in, being the gunslinger and resolving all these things that way. But each of the endings, each of the resolutions feels earned, feels logical, feels within the rationality of the narrative structure. And that's what makes it so satisfying. Because it works within its own paradigm, as opposed to imposing potentially a reader expected paradigm.
Yeah, brilliant. So let's go back to the beginning of chapter 5, where some late arrivals in this whole like tussle over who gets Hel, and you have the ambassador from Fairy sent by Oberon and Titania. That is Cluracan, and he has his sister as a kind of an offering, I guess. The sister has been
unbeknownst to her.
Yeah, pretty much she's been duped into this and doesn't seem like a very willing participant. What were your impressions of Cluracan and his sister? I forgot her name.
Nula.
Oh, yes, thank you. What were your impressions of them? And we can talk after that about the dynamics between the various figures that were Thor being boorish and coming on way too strong to what was her name? Bast. So yeah. So but first the role of the fairies in here. What do you make of that? That's a bit distinct from what the others are doing there. Cluracan is of course saying, we don't want you to give it to us, but we don't want you to give it to anyone. We want it to remain the way it is, and please can we stop having this annual sacrifice? So yeah, what did you make of them?
Well, do you remember Tamlin, the Scottish story?
Yeah.
And it's every 7 years there's the tithe of Fairy to Hell. And so it, like, just drawing that in and going, oh yeah, well, they have this tithe to Hell that they have to keep paying.
Right.
And so like even a little reference like that is just, it's a wonderful thing that drops it in and gives it a greater resonance because it's connected to a story that we are familiar with from our world. And one of the things that I genuinely enjoyed about this is like they show up as those very ethereal, beautiful, Celtic style elves. And then Dream, when he accepts Nula basically into his service, but it's like, well, you can stay in a guest room. I'll make a guest room for you. But I don't like little magics, and removes her glamour. And she's not the sort of the tall, beautiful, ethereal, Tolkien-esque Galadriel figure. She's an inhuman character. She's a fairy. And we realize that a lot of this, we hear about fairy glamours, we hear about that magic. Like this has been part and parcel of these mythologies and these stories and these folk tales. And just to see it played off so casually. And again, it's that wonderful just including it and having it as part of the fabric of the reality. And I like that little nod to it, bringing in the tithe to Hell, the reference to fairy glamour, and the sort of magic that they have to make themselves appear more beautiful. And the fact that the fairy are inhuman creatures. And we saw that in A Midsummer Night's Dream, that range of different fairy types. That, well, why would they all look the same? And with Cluracan himself, he just casual homosexual relationship with is it the father of Khufu?
It's an Egyptian priest.
Then I think the name, from what I know, he gives the name of the character,
He does. Yep.
and in Egyptian history, I think that's the name of one of the really early pharaohs.
Okay.
Who has shown up. But the absolute just casual normalcy of, yeah, well, of course this is how he lives. And this is going back into the 90s. This isn't 2024 when this was written, when to include something like this would be accused of, oh, well, it's being woke, oh, it's forced diversity, or any of these sort of ridiculous claims. This is nearly 30 years ago.
Right.
And it was included just as a matter of course that, yeah, different people, different parts of the world, different cultures. This is part of the fabric of what Gaiman was doing at the time. And sorry, the reason I bring that up is I remember some of the reactions to the adaptation in the TV show, and some people were perplexed by suddenly it going woke, and you're like,
oh,
did you read the comics?
Yeah. He does go a little far too, and grabs Dream by the robe and says, but Lauren, there is a kind of, whoa, okay, Dream can be a little scary too, right?
And that high-handed nature of the fairy, and even when Dream says, well, of course Nuala can return home, and it's like, are you going to tell Titania that you have rejected her gift?
Right.
And again, that I get the inhuman nature of how the fairy work, their gifts, of what those exchanges are and mean, all tied into the mythology. But I do like his high-handed arrogance of, he grabs Dream, and Dream's like, that was a step too far, and he's like, yeah, but right, okay,
yeah.
And then it's like, well, I'm just going to go and get drunk, because that's his whole point of being, that he goes, well, I'm not going to be able to change his mind. There are some big heavy hitters here.
Yeah.
Let's just get drunk and enjoy ourselves.
Pretty much. Varsha, do you have any thoughts on the fairy ambassador or anything that has come up?
So, Nuala, I think there was one section that I found interesting about her when, after all the various gods have had their nighttime talk with Dream, the next morning we hear about the fallout of it all through Nuala passing through the crowd. And I was curious about that. Is it because she's been sort of this, I don't even think she said much at this point, and she's just been dragged here against her will, told some lies, and then now she has to stay, and she doesn't even get to look pretty how she wants while she's here. And so that particular section intrigued me. I don't have an answer to that. I was hoping you both could help, but why she was the one we heard the fallout from the previous night the next morning.
Thoughts on that, AP?
Well, Nuala emerging, because Clura Khan is the ambassador, so she has been appended to him. And I love the way she comes out, and all of the others have their little cliques. They have their discussions. And as Clura Khan points out, like they're quite powerful or famous or renowned. And she's this kind of person who's just walking by, and she has no one to talk to. She's alone. She's isolated. And each time she kind of approaches a group, we get a snippet of that conversation. So it's a way, obviously, to give the reader exposition about what's going on and what the fallout is. But at the same time, each time the group kind of notices her, she's not part of the in-group. They close off, they stop.
Yeah.
And she moves on. She has no place. She's constantly moving between places. And that feeling of being out of place, of not having your own realm, not being in control of what is going on and not fitting in. Sowing the seeds of it here for an exploration for her character later on in the series. But Varsha, I agree. I thought it was brilliantly done. How else are we going to get all of those moments of the people talking? Is that, well, stereotypically or typically, you would just do what they do, which is, here's the frame of them talking about it, and then skip on to the next one. We have an omniscient narrator who can move around and show us whatever the narrator wants. But this is a way of sort of tying it together and showing that there are all of these different groups. And sometimes people feel lost and alone. And we see that even with the dream servers, the people who are,
People who
having
are
their,
in the
Yeah.
dream world, yeah.
and the guy's like, have I seen you before? Like, I must have your name. And she's like, go away, I have to serve drinks. And then when they try to, as they are waking up, as everything is breaking up, she says, oh, I think I hear the doorbell. That, again, these fragmented moments of lives, that dream is made up of all of these different things. And I thought that was just a wonderful thing, pointing out that yes, we have these singular and powerful and important characters, but we also have Matthew. We also have Nuala. We have these servants who are brought in, who are just casual dreamers, and they're having the weirdest dream of their life. That there's an entire range of people brought into this.
And most importantly, I think we have Nada, but we have to get to her first. So we probably, I don't know if you guys have any other comments on any of the other diners there. I mean, I thought the Norse ones were kind of interesting there with the dynamic between, and Loki turning up later on, having changed forms, is an interesting moment. But eventually we need to get to Azazel and Nada and all of that. But first, what are some of the more interesting dynamics that you two want to talk about from the different...
Philip, I wanted to ask your opinion. What did you think of the portrayal of Thor? Because obviously he is overly muscled. He is monstrously huge. He
and he's kind of disgusting the way he comes on to Bast and tells these horrible jokes about his body parts when using his hammer as a prop. Yeah.
If you rub my hammer, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
Like the juvenile adolescent, and also he's just dumb and violent. And so how does that match into your impression of Thor?
I think that this version of Thor is definitely more gross. But the Thor of Norse mythology is a big, oftentimes boorish kind of, but more likable than this Thor was. This Thor is icky. But yeah, in general, I think the boorishness and the whole, being the big oaf, next to Odin, who is very clever and perceptive, and Loki, who is absolutely manipulative and a force of chaos. Thor is just this big dumb brute, in most of the stories, who just kind of just smashes things and does his thing. He's not known for his wit. So yeah, I think mostly consistent. The way he, I mean, that's not absent from Norse mythology. It was more likely to be Odin, though, who would be trying to take advantage of women in the stories. Not so much Thor, but it's just a little twist on him, making him a little more disgusting. I thought, but that was fun, and I especially like what Gaiman does with Loki. I think Loki is a character that Gaiman enjoys a lot. And probably Odin as well. But Loki's ploy there at the end, because he doesn't want to be returned to his being wrapped in his son's intestines and having the snake dribbling the venom on him while his wife tries to collect it and all that. That's the earthquake story. We talked about that, I think, last time when we talked about this whole narrative. So he cleverly the poor guy whose form he switches with, I don't know how he pulls that off exactly, but he's trying to say, but wait, I'm actually, and then Thor just punches him out. So he can't tell them, wait, I'm not Loki, so that was kind of fun.
One of the things that I find fascinating is, obviously, with a lot of modern interpretations of Thor has been very much cleaned up and made very, very heroic, and particularly with the images from the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Thor as this great hero and Thor from the comic books. But he was a violent god.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think there's a certain level of sympathy and empathy that Gaiman has for Odin, who is sinister and tricksy, and Loki, who is clearly sinister and tricksy. They're both smart storytellers.
Yep.
So Gaiman as storyteller, you think potentially that there's this level of empathy and sympathy for the storytellers, and the big dumb brute who's the bully, let's make fun of him for a little bit. And you can almost see that dynamic, which I don't know. You were probably a jock who beat people up in high school, Philip.
Yeah. So yeah. No, not me. But I was more the cool artsy type, you know. Hey.
Sorry, it was the word cool. I can believe artsy type who was interested in learning and was
Yeah.
scholarly and all that, but cool?
All right.
Learning school, right?
Well, we think so, but you know, we don't get to dictate what other people think.
That is true. So yeah, any other observations about the dynamics going on there before we get into Azazel and eventually Nada? Were there more fun moments? I mean, they were entertained for a moment there by Cain abusing his brother and making him into
Oh yeah.
sausages.
Yes.
He actually made Abel into sausages.
Is
Well,
that what
and
happened? I didn't know
yeah,
how that ended. I saw Abel's head briefly.
Yeah.
well, it's the running joke in it that Cain every day kills Abel.
Right.
And so it starts off with he saws him in half, and you see in the background like it's not an illusion. He just sawed him in half.
Right.
And then he saws his head off and puts it in a box. He says, you wanted to be in show business. And then it's sort of off, almost off panel. It's like bring the mincing machine, the grinder.
Yeah.
And then later on, he's holding all of the sausages. And then the personification of chaos is like, is the man sausage?
Yeah.
It's this ludicrous over the top. And again, it's meant to be an illusion, but he just did it.
Right.
And playing with that perception of reality and playing with storytelling and performance and narrative, that the expectation it would be an illusion, and these
Uh-oh.
One bit that broke my brain a little bit, when the box that represents order says, "I will take over hell and create a realm of order." The idea of hell as representing order, I think I was like, what would that look like? That was, I think, bordering on funny. And when Dream says, "I suggest you leave this room. It might go out of existence soon." That was funny too, because it's unclear whether the guests would disappear along with the room, just casually. No big deal, but you might want to leave soon. You might stop existing in a while.
it's not turning the lights on and off at the end to go, yeah, it's time to go, everyone. It's like, and the room will cease to exist. But one of the big things about this, why Dream was so careful to extract the promise from Lucifer when he was in Lucifer's realm. And we see that he has offered sanctuary to his guests in this realm, because it's his realm. And the laws of being a guest are these sort of universal constants. Well, obviously, unless you're able and you live there.
Right.
But he gives guest rights to it. And it's only when Azazel withdraws from accepting the guest rights,
Right,
that suddenly now Dream has full power over everything. And I thought that was nice, a nice little parallel about these old rules, these old laws that bind these characters that we have found in stories, the same way that Calliope was bound, using the old rules, using the old formula, that these transcend time and space, that it rules over their very existence, because they aren't people the way that we understand people.
right.
They are these constructs, and they have their boundaries. But you had mentioned, Varsha, you had mentioned about order. Do you remember the old sort of label machines that used to punch in the thing and it would spit out that's what I thought of when I saw that. But this was
the notes that they were printing out for communication. Yeah, that was really funny. I think in the previous chapter we saw chaos and order side by side, right? The ones that we read for last time.
Mhm.
And order's I guess panel was printed, like it was a computer printout. And then it turns out that they've been like printing these papers and notes. And the guy, okay, he's not, at first I thought it might be laughing with that, but he seems like some sort of genie, right? The one who's carrying the box around. Um, anyway, the person he communicates through reads the notes and they're all like little computer printouts. So that was funny.
I
And
thought,
also,
oh,
sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead, Varsha, please.
The name of the book, Skildekin, I looked that up and it's something you store alcohol in, and it's not an actual god, I don't think. So that was hilarious too, but I don't quite know if that's the only meaning. The top result in Google was just about the box, a cask in which you store some alcohol in, I think.
Well, in DC Comics, Chaos and Order are factions within the superhero universe.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like they exist as things. So I think Gaiman was drawing on part of the history of DC Comics
Hmm.
for Chaos and Order, because I am certainly not an expert on that, but I recognized a couple of the references.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Speaking of DC references, the piece of Dream's soul that Odin offered him, was it the father from the family that was trapped in Dream World and they kept replaying the same scenarios over and over from a few issues ago? Is that who he was offering to Dream?
It looked like another superhero there. Yeah.
well,
Mm-hmm.
and again, there are these multiple versions of the Sandman as a character in DC Comics, and of course, then if people were reading the comics and believed in it, that is a fragment of. And DC's had multiple continuities,
Hmm.
so which version is which, and even versions of Thor, because Odin refers to it as the we Asgardians who are doing this battle, and Thor and Sif and these characters that we know from various stories
Mm.
that they turn up in comic books. And
Hmm.
so Odin's going, well, I find this thing. And so again, the fragmented reality of these different stories and different versions of characters that and it's something that Gaiman explores much further with American Gods. The idea of there being multiple versions of the same God depending on who is believing in them and how they believe in him,
Right.
or believe in them and how they worship them. And Terry Pratchett plays with this a lot with what was the book, Small Gods in
Uh-huh.
the Discworld. So it's not a completely unique idea, but it's still being played with here.
Hmm.
Thought it was interesting too, the various offerings from the contestants who are after Hell. Among them, Bast offers to give Dream information about his missing brother. So that's that again, that mysterious brother who's been absent from the family for quite some time. All I know is his name begins with D, at this point.
And they refer to him as the prodigal.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So I
Again,
mean, he was brought up earlier, and then Dream was finally like, well, he was tempted by that offer, but he was like, yeah, he wants to be on his own. Let him, have
so
his alone
if
time.
he wants to be found, he will let us know that he wants to be found.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think like part of this, particularly the resolution with Nada, we see some of how Dream has changed.
Yes, in a big way. Yeah.
And I think that is a very important aspect, just that we'll probably end up on. But it's having a lot of fun talking about all of the different people and what they want. And like, even when Varsha, when you pointed out that Order wanted Hell, I'm just imagining some sort of bureaucratic nightmare where you're in a queue and you're queuing
Oh.
forever, and then you get to the window and they go, "Oh, that's the wrong form. You have to join that queue." But so then you go to and it's just this very order. It's like going to the most boring Disney World ever.
Oh, I like that. That could fit a definition of hell. Yes. Yes, it could.
So,
Um,
so they all make their offerings, and
mhm.
Dream is cogitating upon what he's going to do, and then the next morning they all wake up and I love how Thor has a hangover and he has a little cloud over him. And he's got a puddle under him.
That was one panel that if you read from the, like, if you looked at the picture bottom up, you could totally misread that. He had a cloud over his head, but a poof puddle of water
Yeah.
beneath.
Yeah.
Well, given that Bass had already made the comment that he was trying to mop up his own effluvia with his beard,
Yeah.
um,
He needs a
she
bath.
certainly was unhappy. And but even like when Matthew had appeared to say a bit of a problem because he was talking to Odin's ravens, and they went, "Oh yeah, a thunderstorm broke out," and Dream's like, "Right, I've taken care of it," and that foreshadows the level of control that Dream has in his reality. There's that moment where something terrible has just happened, and he just it's dealt with. That signal's there and gives us the grounding and the foreshadowing for how he resolves things later. And I thought that was actually quite cleverly done. In combination with what you had pointed out about, oh yeah, and the room's going to cease to exist. That
Yeah, speaking of the resolution, it really comes because Remiel's being possessed, and we had this whole moment of him initially very resistant to this resolution, where he's like, "What? No, not me! No, this is terrible!" And finally resigning himself to this, especially when Duma just silently takes the key. And then he says, "All right, if he's going to do it, then I suppose I will too." What did you think of this resolution to the whole problem that Dream is encountering, to have Big G God speaking through Remiel in that moment and saying, "We need a hell," actually. So what did you two think of that?
So I think there were several interesting aspects of that for me. One, if I may say so, the complete, I guess, the at a distance with which a creator tells Remiel, yeah, you need to do this and you can never come back just casually. Like, I meant for you to do this all the time. I think, I think that was a little, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess scary that, yeah. Anyway, and then I guess the crisis that Remiel has after that, where he's like, no, I don't want to do this, but then he can't go back anyway. Where would he go? And so he needs to, he decides, I'm going to go hang out with Duma instead. All of that reminded me a little bit of this short story by Ted Chiang called Hell is the Absence of God. The premise is basically that, like, if you don't have the grace of God, you end up in hell, where the only thing wrong with it, other than, like, it looks exactly like the real world, except, like, you can never reach the presence of God through anything. So this felt a bit like that. Hell can be whatever it wants to be, but God won't be there, and the angels won't have access to Silver City again. And I guess, like, I'm not too familiar with biblical lore, so but the fact that you can't see the light, that feels like a big deprivation, but also the high-handedness with which the creator sends him away, I think, that invokes some emotions.
I love how he works through in his head. He goes, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to rebel like Lucifer. And you go, and like who? And where did he end up?
Yep.
There you go.
He has no way out. He has no way out.
Yeah.
But it was a fascinating resolution because, again, it kind of absolves Dream of the responsibility. And you can see he just uses it as a get out clause to avoid conflict with all these people. Say, you have a problem, take it up with the guy upstairs. This has nothing to do with me. He wanted it back. I gave it back to him. And so if you have a problem, and they're all going, well, maybe I won't. I won't make a big deal out of this. Like, it's because previously Dream has suggested that there are essentially only two beings in the universe more powerful than he is. The creator of the Silver City and Lucifer. That's basically it. That's a fairly short list.
Yeah.
And if Dream's that worried about it, how would someone like Odin feel?
Hmm.
So I thought it was really nice resolution because again, everyone else was bargaining for it or threatening him or wanting it, and it was no, this thing must be, and he's
Right.
like, okay. And the one thing that Dream understands absolutely is duty.
Hmm.
He understands that, and when someone says, "But this must be, it must do this thing," and it's yeah, that makes sense to me, and he hands it over. Plus, he didn't want it in the first place.
No, he really didn't want it. This was an easy way out for him in a way too. Yeah.
It was a little funny that after agonizing over it for so long, he basically almost outsourced the decision. It was not he got the answer like, okay, yeah, cool. That works for me. Here you have the key.
See, I don't think he agonized over it that long. I think he was more bothered that he had to
Mm.
spend an entire night with everyone traipsing in with their. And he's like, okay, what's your offer? Yeah, right, go away. And no, you've made your offer. There's a queue of people outside who are all going to do this. It's a bit
Mm.
like when you're teaching a class. You say, does anyone have any questions that are relevant to this thing? No, we're all fine. And so you go, okay, well, I'll see you next week. And then suddenly there's this whole queue of students. You're like, what? So, well, I have a question. I went, I literally, what? They, why didn't you ask during class? Why did you wait until class is over? Well, I just wanted to ask this thing, one on one. And you're right. Okay, but that's what Dream is going through. And he's looking at this queue winding down through his whole
Mm.
realm of everyone.
So everyone does eventually leave, some more quickly than others. And we do have the moment, though, when Azazel attempts to basically say to Dream, "You didn't give me what I want. I'm going to torture this Nada." And Dream goes inside, and because it is Dream's realm, Dream is able to get one up on Azazel and rescue both Koronzon and Nada in the process of entering inside this entity, Azazel. So,
Well,
any thoughts on that?
well, the 2 point. Firstly, the reason he is absolutely allowed to do this is because guest rights have been granted to everyone
And he
who
forfeited them.
entered,
Yeah.
not just people who were obvious. So everyone had guest rights, and that includes Azazel and, that includes Nada and Chrononozon.
Right.
And then when Azazel refuses and withdraws from the protection of guest rights, it's Dream's like, gloves are off. So and that's what I pointed out earlier, that I thought was really, really important because it gives the permission. And again, Dream is bound by rules, bound by these strictures and structures that he must follow and obey. That's his drive, his duty.
Right.
And this gave him the excuse.
Yeah. Any thoughts on it, Varsha? And the rescue of Nada after all these 10,000 years?
I really liked how Azazel was depicted. I think that it's a really small patch of black on the panel, right? But it feels vast somehow, maybe because it's like it gives the impression that they are stars. Are we supposed to think of them as stars? But the stars surrounding all these teeth, I think that is both nightmarish and awesome at the same time. But yeah, it was interesting how easy it was for Dream to rescue them, and I like that. I like that in his realm, it wasn't that he had to fight through to get Nada back. I and I don't think I was ever really afraid for her that Dream wouldn't be able to get her back because these demons had her. Um, so I guess that's telling of how Dream has been set up so far and how powerful he seems to us, and that's why it felt like it's never going to be difficult for him. And I don't think like Chaos came and tried to threaten him briefly, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. I'm not bothered by it." So yeah, I think I
Balloon.
like that. Yeah, it was an easy resolution, but we did build up to it by making it clear to us that Dream is this powerful, at least in his realm. So that was pretty cool.
Very
And
cool.
but one of the
Yeah.
things I liked about it was he offers Nada his hand and leaves the decision up to her.
Yep. Yep.
And I thought, and again, like, in comparison, even when he first went to hell at the beginning of the series to get his helmet back, he has changed in that moment because he finds Nada and he holds out his hand and says, "You can take my hand." He doesn't grab her, he doesn't remove her, he leaves the choice up to her. And his nervousness when he is going to have dinner with her, his nervousness in meeting her again. And he starts it out with that, maybe, I might owe you an apology and maybe I should apologize. And she slaps him.
Boom.
And quite rightly,
Yeah.
is that you might 10,000 years of hell.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. I just want to quickly point out how cool it is that Dream puts him in a little bottle and puts him in here. And there's a little, you know who that is, right? That's the skull of that
Of the Corinthian.
yeah, the Corinthian. You can tell
Oh,
because of the teeth and the eyes, right? Yeah.
And
oh
the
yeah,
city in a bottle is going to turn up in a different story.
Ah, okay.
nice.
So these are little nods in here. I thought that was clever. And he sticks them all in this little treasure chest of naughty. This must be the naughty step, AP. This box here.
That's how you recognize it because you're always there. But even in that moment when like Azazel says, what, I've captured you, and then like Dream's just looking at him in his hand, like because reality just conforms to what Dream wants. Does
Right.
that remind you of anything from earlier on, perhaps an episode with the diner?
Mm. Yeah.
Because and again, it is set up. It's the same trick played twice. But and again, Dream's like, no, this reality conforms to my will. And you were never a threat to me. But one of the things that I find really fascinating before we talk about Nada, because that is a big moment in this
We have to
I
talk about Nada. Yeah.
but how the image of Dream changes again depending on sometimes who is speaking to him. So where the perspective is. We have seen this before with these different stories, and whoever is looking at Dream, it's their perception of Dream creates the image.
Right.
And we see that Dream's image shifts and what he wears. So he's in his like very, very formal robes when he's addressing them and they're having the banquet. And then when he's sitting in his throne room, he's in jeans and a t-shirt.
Right.
Which is much more similar to how Death dresses when she first arrived and she's in her casual gear, and Destiny's like, you're not wearing your formal robes. It's like, oh, fine. That we see that's had an impact on Dream, that he's now mimicking Death a bit more in her attitude.
Mm.
And I just thought that was very interesting, that sometimes it is heavily shaped by who's looking at Dream, and other times it's an expression of what Dream is going through.
Like with Nada, of course. So there's Dream waiting as we see him most of the time, and then that's how he appears when Nada comes in the room, right? So that's a clear example of what you're talking about there, I think. Do we want to talk about that scene now, the interaction between them and his apology, where he gets sort of slapped, and again, we've been seeing the evolution of his character to from a very remote, very indifferent entity to an entity that is beginning to understand humanity, is beginning to become more like humanity in many ways, and is developing empathy. And that whole interaction after the slap is where I think he sort of is, wow, I actually really am sorry. You're right. This is, I did that out of pride because you rejected me. I just punished you because I did it out of pride. My pride was hurt. And what did you think of that whole scene and interaction, and that she actually after that does kind of accept with a nice kiss his apology, and they come up with a resolution for her, which is later we see that she's reborn as an infant. So, thoughts on that, Varsha?
Yeah, I was going to say something, I forgot. Oh yeah, I was curious why well, she refused to marry him 10,000 years ago because she was worried about what it would do to her people. But now she is barely a memory in for her people, like we saw in that story. So I did wonder why she refused him this time. Is it just that too much has passed between them, and so we can't be together? I didn't really get that impression. It felt like it was the same reason as before, except it no longer applies. So yeah, I was curious about that. But yeah, in terms of, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, it's just I'm just wondering why she would want to marry the guy that had her imprisoned in hell for 10,000 years.
Yeah.
No, I
That
agree, but it didn't feel like that was the reason. And she rejected him, like she straight up rejected him, but it felt like it was she was felt like she was implying that it's for the same reason, but not really.
but she's also still immortal, even though she is now dead.
Mm,
She is still immortal, and that rule still exists,
Right.
mm,
at least to some extent. And she goes like, "It's the same issue that we had 10,000 years ago. This rule exists. We cannot break it. And
mm,
the last time I told you this, you sentenced me to hell for 10,000 years."
yeah.
Um, and I think Dream's imprisonment at the very beginning of the series, what he went through when he meets up with Calliope, and now, how did this all start? Where Death said to him, "Yeah, you treated Nada really badly, little brother," and he's like, "I have to make it better."
Yeah.
And being confronted with that, going through this whole thing, and like Lucifer giving him the key, it's his focus was always to get Nada back, and that's why the offer of that must have been tempting to him. But
Mm,
again, Judy got in the way of his personal desires, and now we have that moment, and he's so nervous in that room waiting for her.
Mm.
And think like how casually he dealt with Azazel, and he is nervous waiting on Nada. And that's not because he fears her power or her power level, or that there's going to be, because she can judge him, and she would be right to judge him. And there is nothing he can say to defend himself. He has no power against that,
Right.
because it's not a straight up fight. So we understand his nervousness, and it is communicated so wonderfully in those short panels of, yeah, is she on her way kind of thing. Because again, he could click his fingers, and they would be sitting in a room, but he doesn't. He
mm,
requests her presence, and again, this: I am not ordering. I am not demanding. I am not forcing this. That is such a sea change from who he was. And then to be confronted about this, and to be reticent to admit his own feelings, even though his experience has taught him that what he did was wrong. Calliope's experience has taught him what he did was wrong. Death calling him out directly. And here he is, he still can't quite say it until he sees her anger,
Her
and she
pain.
slaps him.
Yeah.
And then it hammers home.
Yeah.
And I think that is the moment of change for him. And so, in granting her, because he robbed her of a life, and again, this was all started off by Death saying you treated her badly. Death saying this was wrong. If the death was wrong, then the right way to do it is a new life. And so she gets a new life, a new way to be free. And I thought that was, again, a wonderful way to resolve it, that makes there's a narrative logic to it.
I like that
mm,
resolution.
yeah.
And I like this panel with Dream holding Nada as an
Mm.
infant, as a baby, and his words are, "And I will not forget you, Nada. Live a good life. You will always be welcome in the dreaming whatsoever body you wear. Farewell." I mean, you can see there's a genuine, like, he's come to a real point of understanding here, and that the resolution is that she gets another chance. Is kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I liked, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was saying I like the interaction just before that scene where she asks him if he'll remember her, and he said yes. Well, I know that you remember me. He says no, but I will remember you. And so, like, closing that out by saying that to the baby too, I think that was nice.
Yeah.
Because again, if she remembered everything, then she is never going to be free of the 10,000 years of hell.
That too, yes.
So, you know, it's there's a poignancy to it and a bittersweetness to it.
Yeah.
Which, and again, I think it's such a just a beautiful ending to that. But and we see that Dream isn't a good guy. He isn't a hero. He is this complex character.
He's doing a deal with Loki, right?
Yeah.
And we know how Dream likes his deals. He did a deal with Shakespeare.
Yeah. He's doing a deal with Loki. I assume that's going to come up later on. I would expect that to come up later on. But yeah, anything else that you two? I mean, we have Lucifer at the beach with the old guy watching the sunset. So
And again, the old guy, he has again a deeper story. His sons who died in wars, and he doesn't have anyone left. And that level of pain in your life, and you can understand someone like railing against God. How can you do this? But he goes down to the beach and he looks up at the sunset and he's like, anyone who can create that can't be all bad. Like that's there's still beauty in this world. And then you have
Lucifer
that
concedes. Yeah, the sunsets are bloody marvelous, you old bastard. Satisfied? That's Lucifer's last words in here. Yeah.
and I just think the pairing of Dream and Lucifer as characters, where pride, arrogance, these are the hubristic flaws that they have that make them in some ways very tragic characters. The way, well, Milton portraying Lucifer
Paradise Lost, yeah,
as a tragic hero or tragic anti-hero. But we see that those parallels between the two. And again, the high-handedness, the arrogance, the hubristic nature of Dream at times, and how that is being tempered. And there is only so much tempering that can be done before the vessel breaks. And I find that as a very interesting thing that is slowly being worked in here, that we see Dream is trying to change. But how quickly and how much can an immortal who has existed as long as he has existed, that is the articulation of a concept, how much can that articulation change?
Right. What do you make of the ending where Remiel is basically adjusting his view of hell and saying, ah, yes, the flames of hell have become refining fires, burning away the dross, leaving purity and repentance and good. And this emphasis on the word purity a lot, because Remiel thought of himself as pure. And initially that was why he shouldn't be there. But now he's adjusted his thinking. And he's thinking, yes, hell is actually a place where, and they even tells the one demon, no, don't torture this person this way. You can do it that way. As long as you're thinking of it as purification, carry on, right? And then the person says, no, this isn't any better. Actually, it's worse, right? So what do you guys make of this ending? Varsha?
Yeah, I was curious about why it is worse. Like I was trying to figure out why it's worse if it's a purifying torture rather than a mindless torture. Is it that they can continue to feel hard done by, like they didn't deserve to be here and oh, they are suffering so much, versus oh, they actually did something that's deserving of punishment.
Yes, I think you're on the right track, but I'll let AP answer. Yeah.
Well, I had a slightly different way of thinking about it, which was this is an eternal punishment. It lasts forever.
Right.
Mhm.
And so if you're being punished forever for something that you did, you go, right, well, I'm being punished. And we see, the when Lucifer was emptying hell, the guy who refused to live, but I am the evil, blah, blah, blah. And this is my eternal punishment. And Lucifer's like, oh, get out. Like you're done. Like, no one remembers you. But what Remiel says is, oh no, but this is purification. But if you can never be purified, they are never going to be done.
Mm.
But now there's almost this promise that, but one more little bit and you could get to the Silver City, you could get to heaven.
Mm.
Except it's an eternal punishment. It cannot end, but it's like a carrot on a stick that's dangling and you can't quite reach it.
Mm.
And that actually makes it worse because you're not just being punished now, but there is hope of salvation, but it is forever just out of your reach.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which
that makes sense.
Is kind of cruel. But the point that I quite liked about this is where Remiel is like lying back and, oh, I'm going to drink my wine and eat my grapes. And Dumas still hovers.
Mm.
Mm.
His feet don't touch the ground. He still remains pure.
Mm.
So
And
is
silent as well. Yeah.
But Duma's the one wearing the key, right? And Dream says that
Yes.
the key corrupts. So Duma has been incorruptible so far. Is that the point?
Well, it'd be interesting, if this series ran for ages and ages and ages, and then we came back to it. If Duma's feet ever touched the ground, well, I suppose we keep saying he, we should really be saying they, because
they
have
nowadays. Yeah.
they have no genitalia. They are not male. They are not female. Right. They are angels. They don't possess gender or sex.
Right.
But Duma is serving faithfully and still keeping to who they are, whereas Remiel has kind of rebelled and given it all up. And well, when in Rome, do as the Romans. I'll make the best of it. The mind can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. But Duma is holding to their role, to their origin, to who they are. So it's fascinating. Is this that they would be able to return to the Silver City if ever recalled, whereas Remiel would not?
Yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of setup for possible future issues here, I think. But any final thoughts from either of you on these last 3 issues of the Season of Mists?
I had one more about Nada to bring up.
Sure.
So in the conversation between Dream and Nada, she says, I was there in hell for 10,000 years being tortured, and she blamed him for it. And at some point, they talk about whether she could have just left. And I think that circles back to Lucifer telling people, you're choosing your own punishment here, and nobody remembers you. So I think that was nice for me, because you're blaming Dream for your punishment, but maybe there was something you could have done about it yourself. So I thought that was a bit of a powerful moment there as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Well, there's certainly been an emphasis on free will and choice, and how even if you don't think you have a choice, oh well, I must act this way, there is still a choice. And this whole story where Dream had this key, what is he going to do with it? He had a choice to make. There were all of these offers on the table. He didn't have to do what he did, but he felt the right thing to do, the only thing that he could do was to return it. But it's still a choice. And I think that emphasis on free will, particularly when we think of dreams being so out of our control, that we are at the mercy of our dreams, of our nightmares, whereas this emphasis on free will and control and the strengths and weaknesses of what control can do. The dangers of too much control, too little control. We see explored in Calliope. Controlling other people versus controlling ourselves. And again, it's not about a distinct answer to these things, but it's seeing them woven into the fabric of what is being explored to make us, or to help us think about them, to approach different thoughts in different ways. But like I said at the beginning, there's a reason why the Sandman remains a favorite of mine. And this emphasis on story, on narrative logic, on the intertextual references and relationships, the fact that there are echoes and resonances and recurrences of previous events, but told and spun in a new way, that actions in the past have repercussions in the future, that this is a continuing narrative tapestry. That's part of the reason why I love it. Whereas I think a lot of modern comic book storytelling, because particularly in these big franchises, it's, well, there are certain moments of lore that you cannot change, and this is canon. But how long has Peter Parker been a high school student, and then like in university for 20 years, or a young reporter for another 50 years? How long's Batman been around? He's like over 100 in the comics now, but he's still running around fighting crime, because time doesn't move that way. Even though when you start adding up the events, there's an implausibility to it, but there's a narrative logic to it, and I like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, excellent discussion, guys. And next time, I'm just going to read off the titles of the issues that we're going to be discussing over at A Critical Dragon. They are Thermidor and August, and 3 Septembers and a January. So those 3 are what we're going to tackle next time. If you want to follow along, that should be happening within a matter of weeks, I would say. So yeah, lovely. Thank you both. I had a great time. It is always much more fun to read something along with friends and have an enriching discussion about it. And thank you everybody who has been watching. I will have links to the 2 channels of my friends here, Critical Dragon and Reading by a Rainy Mountain. And I'm also keeping a playlist of all these discussions. It's under Gaiman in my among all my playlists. I'm keeping these in there. So thanks everybody, and until next time.